So I'm doing a video about, it was about the end of Survivor 39. I talked about it earlier in the week, I think on Twitter. It's incredibly related to Brandon Hantz in Survivor 36 Caramoan. And I told this to Dana, and she said, no, it's nothing like... What happened with Brandon Hantz on Survivor Caramoan is nothing like what happened on Island of the Idols at all. But there's a lot of similarities there, and so I kind of wanted to talk about it and explain part of that. So obviously, Brandon Hantz did not do anything similar to what Dan did on Survivor 39. There was no... what Brandon did on Survivor Caramoan... I'm going to assume everybody's seen it, is he had some type of breakdown in terms of he had medication prior to the show, and he was on his own, and Philip Shepard was kind of driving him crazy, and it just got to him. Brandon was not able to mentally handle the situation. He was not able to be stable enough to be on Survivor. And so Brandon Hantz, and this all kind of started after the very first vote on the Favorites Tribe in Caramoan, where Brandon Hantz was kind of on the outs. I was on the outs with him. Everybody who voted for Andrea at the start was kind of on the outs. We all felt like we were next. So that was me and Brandon and Brenda, and I'm trying to think who else was in that group of people. We all felt like we were next. The thing is that the favorites kept winning challenges, so Brandon Hantz kept, he had nothing to worry about, but it was just kind of this paranoia. And I actually got along really well with Brandon and got to know him pretty well. And he had a lot of problems back at home. Brandon, I haven't talked to Brandon in years, but anyway, long story short, he went crazy one day, and he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be on Survivor anymore. And so he threatened to pee in the well, and he dumped the rice, and he grabbed the machete, or he wanted to grab the machete, but somebody ran off with the machete. Anyway, he made it very uncomfortable for everybody. Everybody who was there was super uncomfortable with Brandon being there. What ended up happening was Jeff Probst removed Brandon, or he wanted to remove Brandon, and so we held this impromptu tribal council where we all got to vote publicly. And so what does this have to do with Survivor 39, with Kelly and all the stuff that happened with that? I wanted Brandon to stay. And I wanted Brandon to stay not because, I wanted to keep him there to keep doing the stuff that Brandon was doing and making people uncomfortable. I didn't want any of that to happen, obviously. I wanted Brandon to stay because he was a number to me, and I felt he had some loyalty to me. And when we had this public vote, when it was decided that, Brandon had to go, the producers, cut it, and they said he's got to go, we all had to go to the challenge, the very next challenge that was supposed to be an immunity challenge, and instead of the challenge, we did this impromptu public vote, and I had to say, yes, I want to vote him off, when I didn't. I wanted him to stay. I wanted to actually keep him around as long as I could, because he was actually pretty loyal to me in terms of I felt comfortable with him around. And so that hurt my game, I felt. It didn't ultimately affect anything. It worked out in the end, but I would have wanted him to stay. And the issue with Dan, with the issues that took place on this current season, that affected Janet. That affected Janet because Dan was in her alliance, and that changed, her opinion of him, and it changed her opinion of what her priorities were. Now it wasn't keep Dan around. You get what I'm saying. There's an inherent conflict of interest there, and production needs to be able to step in and say, this is not something that players should have to deal with on top of planning and playing their game. And it got so bad on this season that they broke the fourth wall. They showed that production had to get involved, and all those other things. So I think the Brandon situation it could have been very similar had it not been handled in the same way that this was handled on this season. The Brandon situation was there was, no breaking of the fourth wall. Everything played out like it should have. Everybody kind of agreed. If I could go back and do it over, would I say, no, I don't want Brandon out? it's a social game. I'm not going to speak out and say, yeah, let's keep the guy that's making everybody uncomfortable. Let's keep him around. Like, let's do a fair vote out. Like, I'm not going to say that because it's a conflict of interest. People will say, well, Eric's, being difficult. So it basically, that puts me in a tough position. So I think that, I think that Survivor handled what happened this season horribly. I think they've also, they kind of resolved all that in the finale, and I'm glad that they pre-taped the finale and they let, they went over it and they took care to do what they needed to do. And hopefully that they extend this assumption that players that make people uncomfortable need to be handled in a different way seriously, because it was interesting and it made for a TV show, but it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And they involve production, because production should never be present on the show. Like, ideally you have players and Jeff Probst, and that's it. Those are the dynamics in play. Like, you never want to have a producer on camera. You never want to have this behind the scenes, because then the magic of the show goes away. So hopefully they extend, this to other instances of players that aren't, maybe it's not specifically sexual harassment. Maybe it's something with, what happened with Brandon, where it was some type of like mental health issue or some type of, whatever issues may be going on with somebody. So hopefully they're able to see this as an instance of, we need more oversight with this. So that's what I wanted to say with regard to that. I thought the finale was great. I thought that it was cool that it was edited. I thought that made it better. The live finales they've been really awkward maybe the last couple years, so I'm glad that they did that. And I'm looking forward to 40. So 40 should be good and hopefully get us back to a good place. I think this was an overall a good season. 39 was an overall good season. It was very different. It was very different than a normal season just because of all the things that did occur. So it's really unique, and I like that it is unique and it stands out on its own. Obviously, it was horrible, all the stuff that happened. Anything involving Dan never should have happened, but it looks like they're going to learn from this. Hopefully they do.